This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
Hello and welcome to episode 150 of Slick Talk. I am your host, Blackstone Joe, and I'm glad you're here. If you've been paying attention at all to our social media pages, specifically Instagram and Facebook, we've been posting some content related to a can of 1970s Ford 30-weight oil that an analyst, Chris, found at a thrift store, unopened, in ideal condition for testing. You know, we often find that oil doesn't break down just based on calendar time alone, and well, this episode doesn't change that notion, as we did indeed find this 70s special, as I continue to refer to it. This oil looked just fine in a variety of ways. Not only did it not contain anything abnormal visually, but the results looked pretty good too. We're going to break all of that down, Chris and I, on this episode. I think you'll find it's a worthwhile investigation into how we evaluate unused oil, whether it is old or new. What matters? What do you need to know before you use an oil? So whether you're interested or if you need to know if an unopened oil that you have sitting around, is it fit for use? You'll learn in this episode how we evaluate that oil, what matters to us, and what informs our recommendations about whether or not you should run that mystery oil, or if it's oil that you know exactly what it may be and you just aren't sure if how old it is, whether or not that is a concern. You can put all of that to rest by taking a sample and sending it our way. So without further ado, here's Chris and I in studio breaking down that very same 70s special unused Ford oil from 1975. Chris, welcome to Slick Talk. You are now a reoccurring guest. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. 2 times is almost a trend. I'm getting there. Totally welcome to be back again.
We look forward to seeing how these numbers go in the 3rd episode, which, has to come now that we want to keep developing these trends. But reason you're on is to talk about this find you had. It was a
75.
75 oil. And where did you find it?
Found it at a local thrift shop. My fiance was searching for some other stuff. She found some really cute little jewelry holders, and I found a quart of Ford Premium 30 weight. Is rated for gasoline tractors, diesel tractors, turbocharged. Kind of a surprising gambit of stuff on there.
And this is oil that was totally sealed up, no issues with it, just unopened on the shelf, right?
Yep. Next to, how people always sell their gasoline signs and little trinkets and old tools and stuff like that. I saw it. It was like $13, which is probably a pretty good rate for a quart of 30 weight nowadays. So
the next step, I think, at least for an intrepid analyst like yourself, was to get a look at how this oil seemed in testing from like an additive standpoint, if there's anything abnormal about it. So would you say this oil looked unusual, or was there anything about it that stood out to you compared to what we see today in most motor oils?
Not necessarily. When you and I cracked that can open, the discoloration was kind of obvious. It was a little bit gray, when fresh oil nowadays has a kind of amber tint to it. So it was a little bit gray. Didn't look like used oil by any means. Still clear, but it definitely had some discoloration, which is maybe pulled from, the inside of that container. These weren't plastic jugs that we use nowadays. It was in a paper, almost can kind of setup with aluminum foil, maybe some kind of foil in there. So maybe it leached some coloration off of that. Not sure, but it wasn't thick. It wasn't gritty. There were no floating chunks or bubbles or anything like that. It wasn't the prettiest color, but outside of that, we didn't notice anything too unusual when you and I got into that. And if I didn't know what I was looking at, say this report came across my desk and there was no indication of what year it was, what it was, or said, hey, here's a 30 weight, I would have no idea that this was a 50-year-old oil. On the statistics side, the report itself looks like any other 30 weight. I compared it to several others we have, on file, and nothing's one-to-one comparison, but it's all in the right ballpark. The spectral elements we look at, the additives that do the anti-wear and the detergent dispersant that we're so big on and measuring are right in the same range as other stuff we found. Total acid number, total base number, again, very similar to other 30 weights that we see. That I think there's one I had tested maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and it's right in line with that. So very interesting to see that the total acid number, that's one of the biggest concerns that people have is, hey, this has been sitting for so long. Did it go bad? Did it spoil? And oil doesn't spoil like milk does when it's left out of the fridge, but that total acid number is kind of something that we look at. Is it more acidic than what the internals of a normal engine, lawnmower in my case, is rated for? And the answer is no. It is right on line with that. We have other virgin samples on file with higher starting TANs, which is fine. It's really that difference of what it looks like afterwards. The starting point isn't as applicable as the ending point, so that'll be interesting to see when we do get to that point. But no, I would have no idea if we didn't know what this was just looking at it on paper. I would have no idea it was out of a 50-year-old. Well, the thrift shop's not 50-year-olds, but the oil is.
So yeah, we ran a few tests on this oil to see if it was typical or not. So viscosity, we were right in the expected range, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't have any solids or anything that looks abnormal in the spectral analysis, just, the elements that comprise the additive package mainly, right?
Correct.
So with all this information in hand, what was the next step for you? What did you want to do after evaluating the oil, both visually and in testing? What was next on your list?
Well, the whole point of this was to prove that when we tell people, which we say a lot, oil doesn't go bad when it's sitting on your shelf. Just because your car has been in the garage for 2 years unstarted doesn't mean that the oil's gone bad. So I had to prove it. Thankfully, this was a 30-weight tractor mower or tractor oil, and not what I put in my car, because this might have been a very different experiment, but we had to put it in the lawnmower, and we did that here at the office a couple weeks ago. Made a big old mess, but got that cleaned up pretty quickly. It wasn't too bad. So we drained the oil out of my mower, put this the 1975 oil back in it, and I am happy to say I've mowed twice. I have a pretty small lawn, so it's not I'm not out here doing fields or anything, but after 2 runs, my front yard looks good. My neighbor might argue with that, but I think it looks good and it runs good. There were no puffs of smoke. On that initial startup, I was so nervous of it spinning for a couple seconds and then a clunk or a big bust of smoke comes out or anything to that extent. And there was, so far, nothing. It's only been in use maybe an hour and a half. Again, very small yard, thankfully. I'm a big fan of that when it comes to mowing, but for a test sample, not the most hours on it yet, but so far it's been working.
And we're set up really nicely in this case because not only do we have this unused oil that you then put into use and we can see how it looks after testing, you actually took a sample from the mower before putting in this old oil, so we have something of a baseline. And what state was the engine in when you first tested it, and how does this oil that you put in compared to what you were running before?
I was just using, I want to say, O'Reilly's 30 weight, which is pretty standard. It's got the common additives we look at in most, straight weight oils. It's got calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, zinc, as well as a couple other traces here and there that kind of depend on the brand. But for the most part, I'd say those are the 4 main additives that we see, calcium being typically the most prevalent in most oils. So that was the case on that 30 weight that I had in the lawnmower at first that you and I pulled out a couple of weeks ago. I have a little bit more dirt in there. The analyst that wrote the report for me told me to check out my air filter. So shout out to Eric for that one. I appreciate it. I didn't, but I might. I don't know where the air filter is, but I know how to put oil in it. So additive speaking, very similar to the 1975, which is very interesting. If you think about the industry of oil, you would think, well, it's not going to test anything like it would 50 years ago. There's so many differences in engines and performance and so many other stipulations that you wouldn't think it'd be quite the same. And it really is. Those additives I was talking about really do show up about at the same level as what we were looking at before. So on that aspect of things, I did do the reports for the virgin oil, the 1975, as well as what came out of the lawnmower. Viscosities, very close to each other within half a degree, if that, and that could change, depending on who's doing the report or anything like that. So viscosity, right where it should be for a 30 weight. The additive package, while not directly the same, definitely within spitting distance of each other. If somebody had asked me, well, does this look like the right additive package for this? I'd say, yeah, it's not identical, but the stuff we look for is there in good quantities. It's not like anything was in the single digits or, oh, it might be on the dangerous side of things. The calcium's a bit lower than we want to see. That wasn't the case either. Everything is pretty close to what we'd expect to see from anything off the shelf, whether it's 50 years old or, just came out of the plant, factory, the ground.
The production process, wherever that may be.
Correct, yes.
So when it comes to the engine itself, how did that look when you first tested it, and what are you going to look for going forward with this new oil in use, whether you want things to improve or hold steady? Give us an overview of how that engine was doing before you put in this 70s special.
So pretty basic Briggs & Stratton 2-stroke. I want to say probably 1 cylinder if I had to guess. Did the job. Again, I mow the lawn roughly weekly, sometimes not so much, but don't hold me to that. I do my best. I do care about that. And I've not had any issues with this engine. Had it for maybe 2 years, done 1 oil change on this prior to that. Again, not getting a ton of hours of use, but it works well. And is it drinking oil? I'm not having to add any oil. I've not, since then, like I said, I've ran the mower twice. We actually overfilled it. When you and I pulled that sample out, we thought it was a lot emptier than it was. So I had a little bit of blowout after that first run, but since then it's been stable. And it's so hard to check the oil on those. It's got that little yellow dipstick, and you wipe it in the grass a little bit. And it's like, well, all right, this looks like it's up to that line. It's moist. So again, no issues on that. Like I said, it's ran pretty well so far. It's always that first couple of pulls when it doesn't go out right when it's cold and you think, man, is my lawnmower not going to set, or am I just not strong enough? And then you give it a couple more yanks and it twists over. And I start on this little strip in the backyard in front of the garage, and I'm just hoping, man, nothing's going to go wrong. We're going to get through it. And I finished the whole yard, And then my fiance comes out and she said, you did what? I was like, yeah, we put me and Joe put that old oil we found in the lawnmower. I told her that afterwards. So thankfully, that all worked out pretty well. But yeah, no performance issues. Obviously, it's not like a car where we have the oil pressure gauge or, keep an eye on temps or anything like that. But for what it does, it's doing it very well so far.
All right. And from a wear standpoint, where was this motor leaving off when you last saw it in testing? And is there anything in particular you're going to be interested in seeing trend going forward?
Just any differences. Like I said, it's a pretty low-use lawnmower for what it works. It does its job, but it's nice having that sample that we did a couple of weeks ago. I can see 8 parts per million of aluminum, 13 iron. That's typically probably just cylinder and piston wear. There's not too many other moving parts in there. It would really have to be shaken up, I think, for a bearing or something to spin in one of these guys. So having those 2 basic metals, which are ones that we see constantly, aluminum and iron, are such a big gauge for what we do. When we're doing analysis, when we're talking to other people, those are really important metals because obviously a lot of parts are in there are steel, and if that piston goes bad, you're going to know it right away. So it's nice that we have that comparison. I wish I would have known how many hours. Again, if it had an hour count on it, I would have given it to you. Now that I'm doing this in retrospect, kind of annoying that it doesn't. But it's on me. I can keep track of how many more times I mow this year. So just at least being in the same ballpark. I'm not expecting to find significantly less metal. And based on performance, I'm not expecting to find significantly more either. If I thought it was choppy, if I thought that, it was having some hard starts or something to that extent, you might expect to find more metal. But so far, I'm really not. I'm expecting it to be similar to the 2 oil samples we've already done, pretty similar to each other.
Well, right on. We look forward to seeing how things trend with that. I'm just going to keep referring to it as the 70s special in use and looking at how those metals trend. But let it be known from this episode and this data as well that we do practice what we preach in terms of telling you if that oil's fit for use. We mean it because we're going by the same parameters. Thanks for keeping us posted on this saga, Chris. We're going to keep the socials updated with how this engine looks with that oil in service. So if you have a jar, a properly sealed container, ideally, of oil from who knows when, whether you want to test it out of curiosity or necessity, Blackstone Labs can take care of it for you. Chris, thank you for joining me on the show and becoming a recurring guest.
My pleasure, Joe. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad I'm still at the company and made it long enough to be on a second time, and I'm doing something interesting enough to make it on here. It matters a lot to me, too.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you all for hanging out with us. This is Blackstone Joe signing off.
The Slick Talk podcast is powered by Blackstone Laboratories. If you're ready to start your oil analysis journey, visit blackstone-labs.com to order your free test kit.